just want to start my presentation by saying we woke up today very shocked by the pass of our friend, revolutionary Muzan al-Nil. Muzan al-Nil is one of the people work so hard to see a better Sudan. We lose her in a very young age. Muzan al-Nil was a revolutionary, strong woman, worked so hard for years during the revolutionary force. She really believed in doing practical work, so she is with the people during the revolution and did an amazing work in the theoretical frame of the revolution, of the war, the impact of the war, the imperialist powers attacking Sudan and attacking the region. We really feel so sorry to lose you, Muzan, today. I have a privilege to work with Muzan for years. One of our work, as you see in my screen, we had this research report together, me, Muzan, and Khalid, Sudan Revolutionary and Popular Movement. This is one of amazing work Muzan did in her short life. She published many tens of articles speaking about the situation of Sudan and the struggle, the revolution, and everything. It is such a sad day for me, for many people like me, for revolutionary force in Sudan. Sorry to start my presentation by this. This is acknowledged for a friend, a close friend, and someone really worked so hard for better Sudan. In my presentation today, I will try to speak a little bit and talk about the war and look into the war as a counter-revolution war, and also I will give a hint about international solidarity. Just for the people maybe not familiar about the Sudan, this is Sudan. Sudan is a large country with a 50 million population. Sudan is the biggest country in Africa before it divided to two parts, North Sudan and South Sudan. I think many of you know about December Revolution. December Revolution started in 2018. This is a very different revolution. Sudan see many uprisings in our history, October uprising, April uprising, but December was a really different movement for many reasons. This movement start not in capital Khartoum, start in different part of Sudan. Start in the Blue Nile state in 13th of December, but just a few days after that, it spread all around the country. The lead for this revolution was a Sudanese Professional Association, which is a body formulated by different trade unions, different organizations. They worked together to build the revolution. The Resistance Committee, which is a grassroots organization, played a key role during the revolution, building the revolution, the movement on the street, helping people to organize themselves and so on. During the revolution, people estimated there is more than 8,000 resistance committee all around the country. Almost every single neighborhood in Sudan have their own resistance committee. This is a group of young people, mostly young people, not just organize and formulate the revolution, they also play a key role to all things we are seeing since the revolution till today. 6th of April is a big sit-in demonstration. People estimated, people on the street in 6th of April is around 5 million people on the street. As I said, the revolution started in December, built themselves, the movement built on the street for a time. And when it is come to 6th of April, we see 5 million people in the street of not just in the capital Khartoum, but in all big cities in Sudan. 11th of April, a day where the revolution kicked Omar al-Bashir from his office. I think all of you know Omar al-Bashir, one of the longest dictatorship in African history for more than 30 years. People see a lot during these 30 years, kidnapping, killing, poverty, and just name it, as every dictatorship we know. After that, negotiations start by civilian parties and the military council, and they form transitional government starting from August 2019. But this is not, this didn't stay for a long time. 2021 October, a coup organized by the two people fighting today, Al-Burhan, the head of the Sudanese army, and Hemeti, the head of the Rapid Support Forces. What they did the first day of their coup, they kidnapped the civilian leader, including Hamdok, the prime minister, but the Sudanese people, the day they heard the announcement of the coup, they hit the roads. So immediately after just 2 hours, since the coup starts, Sudanese people start to mobilize again against the coup. And what is their demand? Our demand is a full civilian rule for Sudan. And as you see here, this is one of the biggest banner during the revolution. It says the people want to build a new Sudan. This young generation who stay on the street for a long 5 years, their all demand is changing the whole system. This is what they are saying, and they keep saying this is a continuous revolution and we will never stop until change everything in Sudan. But unfortunately, 2023, 15th of April, the two people, as I said, who is responsible about the coup 2021, they start fighting each other. So who are these two people? Al-Burhan, he is the leader of the Sudanese official army, but this army, we know, during the 30 years of the rule of the Muslim brothers in Sudan, this is totally not a Sudanese army. It is idolatrous, linked to the Muslim brothers regime, and we know we couldn't even say this is a national army. We can say this is another type of militia. The other part is RSF. RSF is the Rapid Support Forces led by Hemeti. Hemeti this is the nickname for the Janjaweed. The Janjaweed is responsible about all the horror happening in Darfur since 2003. I think all of you familiar with what is going on in Darfur. It is a war responsible about killing thousands of people, displaced 2 million, and kidnap, rape, just name it, and burn people alive during the Darfur war. But this is continue again in April, war at the same scenario, but this time with bigger scale. When seeing this war, not just in Darfur, it is actually in all Sudan. This is just a statistic about the war, a little bit shocking that more than 12 million people are forced to display. Many of them is displaced internally, and many of them are refugee and asylum seeker in neighboring country. Many in Egypt, for example, Libya, Chad, and just name it, because people flee their home, flee the war, and just try to go to a safe place. Actually, more than half of Sudanese people is facing a real hunger, according to the UN statistic, and more than 500,000 is really in famine. The need of it is $1 billion to just cover the humanitarian need, and the UN keeps saying there is not a real response for this crisis in Sudan. We all know from the start of the war there is a huge humanitarian crisis. It is not about just collapse of the infrastructure, collapse of the health system. Hunger is a real. People actually they lose everything, lose their home, their main income, and so on. So as you see here, the UN office just describes the situation in Sudan is one of the largest displacement, food security, children crisis, and over more than 20% of the population in Sudan flee their home on ongoing war, either internally or across the board. About 10 million Sudanese children, they didn't have an access for education. The World Things, the UNICEF, in her report usually say half of these children maybe will never go back to school in their life. This is just a hint about how the world looks like. People flying their place, as you see here, as whatever they have, and many of them, they didn't even have a shelter. Many of them just stay on a street for days until they have a proper place to stay in. And even these places is attacked by both militia, either the army or the RSF. As you see in this picture at the top, this is example of how these Sudanese people trying to survive. They try to survive through community kitchens. This is all around the country. People couldn't afford to feed themselves. So what they have, the only solution they have is to make this kitchen. This kitchen serve the whole neighborhood. They cook food with this big plate, as you see here, and feed themselves. Most of these are supported by Sudanese diaspora, who did an amazing job to try to help people. As I said, the humanitarian aid from other countries is really minimal, and in many times didn't reach the people in real need. One of the things really attacked by both sides is schools. A million of schools all around the country was hit, and many of them used as camp for militia, and became like a target for the other group as well. As you see here, this is in Geneva. This is a school was really attacked, and as you see here, they make it like ash. As I said, 80% of the health system collapsed as the first few months since the start of the war. If you look to this picture, this is one of the biggest hospitals in Sudan. Khartoum Hospital is the central hospital in the capital, serve not just the capital, even serve whole Sudan by doing the major operation and so on. All these hospital is out of function now. Most of these hospitals in the capital, and the majority of them, as I said, they targeted by both sides. So as you see here, this is, as we said, this is a war against Sudanese people. This is not a war, a two group fighting each other. Why you are targeting hospital? Why you are targeting infrastructure? Unless you want to target the revolutionary people, you target Sudanese people, you punishing Sudanese people because they have a successful revolution against both militia fighting today. I couldn't finish my talk without speaking a little bit about women and girls affected by this ongoing conflict in Sudan. Sudanese women at the front line of December revolution. Many estimations said the majority of the people on the street are women. Women during this revolution, they are not just participate in this demo, they also be a really crucial role in organizing the demo, building the resistance committee, and became a leader during this revolution. But as every conflict, women pay the high price of this conflict. Actually, women outnumber men as internally displaced people. Gender violence, sexual abuse is something we heard about every single day. There is no real record of rape incident or sexual abuse in Sudan, but we know from the report there is a massive number of women were raped during this war, and this is something happened historically in Sudan even during the Darfur war, and women's body became another battleground for both sides. Women also face the worst economic insecurity situation. They have a risk in gender-based violence because of this insecurity. Food insecurity is very extreme between women. Also, there is an absence of a health care. And here, let me say again, the women that face rape, sexual abuse in Sudan, the problem with the collapse of our health system. These women didn't have any access for a proper health care. This is make them under a huge risk after this. Also now we have another problem. As usual, women were excluded from any kind of peace talk, which is going on for a long time. The last thing, let me say what we can do. International solidarity is mean a lot for Sudanese people in this very critical time in their history. We organize Sudanese people with other support. They organize different protests, issue statements. So help Sudanese people to organize these protests and also speak to different organizations and demand the end of the war of Sudan. British show it is complicity in this war. There is a British weapons found in Sudan, in different areas in Sudan. Does this mean there is a British weapon part of this war? So we need to put pressure on British government to stop arming both sides in this war and put pressure in both of them to stop this war. Also, thank you for this meeting, but having more regular meeting about Sudan, talking with Sudanese trade union, revolutionary force, invite speakers to different events will make the Sudanese and the Sudan problem voice is heard. As we always say, Sudan war is a neglected war. We couldn't hear a lot about what is going on in Sudan from the news, but of course, like Stop the War is a very good organization where we can hear Sudanese people voice. Issue Sudanese update leaflet and also issue your own leaflet about Sudan and about what is going on. Facilitate exchange solidarity message, which mean a lot to the people living in Sudan. This is just to show you some of the work we have been doing in the last few years about speaking about what is going on in Sudan, being on the street, demand, as I said, put pressure on the British government to stop the complicity with the war. Different people going in different area, Manchester, Edinburgh, London, of course, and different places all around the country. Also, we work in close with different trade union to show support for Sudanese people. Here an example of how this support can be. This is Samil Bagher, a speaker man from the teacher union in Sudan. He was arrested. We issue a campaign to release him, and this is how show you this campaign can be a successful, making a huge solidarity and support for the Sudanese activists who are facing a horrible situation in Sudan. And Samil Bagher was released after that. And of course, we keep saying in Sudan, this is a continuous revolution. The revolution will continue. And we have a great hope in what is coming on. Maybe my time is not enough to talk a lot about now the revolutionary forces and what they are doing to make things better in Sudan, but still the resistance committee are working. Still resistance committee, their main task now is to help Sudanese people to provide food, essential need, but of course the revolution is here. Last year in December, there is a huge mobilization, a huge movement in Sudan street asking for stopping the war, asking to return back to civilian rule and return back to revolutionary time. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Rania. That was a really good introduction to the situation in Sudan, and I'm really sorry to hear about your comrade who passed away. But thank you for still sharing that with us, and yeah, I think one of the things I noticed in sort of a couple of the things that I was researching ahead of this was the sort of role of trade. trade unions in a lot of these revolutions, and I think you can actually see that going quite far back, all the way to sort of British occupation. So that's definitely an interesting theme, and of course, the role of women has also been sort of in that history as well, with going all the way back to sort of Fatia Ibrahim, who was the first elected woman to Parliament, and also has a really interesting story. So thank you for highlighting those different themes. We're now going to go to Shabbir, who's with that context of sort of what's happening in Sudan, going to speak about how that sort of plays into uh, wider uh, wider conflict and wider regional politics. Shabbir, thanks.
Thanks a lot, Stephen, and thanks for organizing this meeting. And thank you very much to Rania for that really brilliant introduction, which set it all out. And just to pay tribute to Muzan and to send my condolences. I wanted to try and slightly talk about the broader picture, and I was watching the BBC's coverage for my sins today about the anniversary of the Sudanese Civil War, and two things sort of came out in how it was being reported. The first is that it was discussed as if it was a humanitarian catastrophe, and of course it is a humanitarian catastrophe, but you could replace the word fighting in their report with an earthquake or a tsunami. It was just fighting has caused this to happen. Fighting has displaced so many people, like it was some kind of natural disaster, or it was sort of laced with a practically colonial sort of idea of the African people are fighting each other, and this is the result. Um, and secondly, the entire sort of coverage of it and report of it was couched in terms of this is the forgotten civil war, which is not getting any attention because of the Iran war and the ceasefire there. And this is obviously a line of argument that is constantly also leveled by right wingers against the Palestine solidarity movement or the anti-war movement, and which sometimes I think resonates even with people within our movement. This idea that why does Palestine and Iran and Lebanon get all the attention and the demonstrations when there are horrors unfolding in Sudan? And of course, the truth is that the civil war in Sudan is far from separate from what is happening in the Middle East. It is entirely the product of the same imperial architecture of the world and the sort of current reorganization of it. The United Arab Emirates, which has been the primary benefactor of the rapid support forces, particularly because it receives gold, which is extracted from Sudan, and it's a relationship between the UAE and the RSF, which has developed from the RSF being deployed in Yemen to fight the Houthis during the 7 year long war by Saudi Arabia on the people of Yemen. And the United Arab Emirates has played an important role, I think, in instigating this civil war to begin with. When the question of the RSF being integrated into the SAF emerged, and the reasoning for this was because of the huge arms exports that the UAE can deliver over there, but and also the exchange of the extraction of minerals, as I said, but also as we've seen, the UAE has sort of been trying to pursue the development of military installations in the region, the strengthening of neo-colonial relations with other countries in the region, like Kenya and Chad, which have been used as proxies for funneling support for the RSF. Um, and we've also seen the transfer of arms which have been produced in Israel since the UAE sort of signed up to the Abraham Accords, and Israel in December recognized the sovereignty of Somaliland in exchange for building an Israeli military base there. And on the other side, we see Saudi Arabia and Egypt have been the primary backers of the Sudanese armed forces with military, logistical, diplomatic, and training support. And China, which has not been sort of as directly involved, but which has backed the SAF diplomatically and economically, and has a close eye on the Red Sea ports, which are an integral part of its Belt and Road initiative in Africa. And so, for all of these external parties, which are playing to some extent a role in fueling this conflict, but particularly the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, whose rivalry is sort of at the heart of this, we see that the primary considerations are the extraction of resources, the securing of trade routes and cheap labor, and as a foothold for power projection and so-called spheres of influence in Africa. And that is why I think this is entirely linked to what we're seeing in the Middle East with the US and Israel's war on Iran, with the genocide in Gaza, because this is what imperialism is. It is a necessary function of capitalism, of stronger states to try and assert dominance over the states they are competing with to maximize their profits. And what we're seeing right now is the breaking down of the world order in which the US has been the sole unipolar hegemon of the world. And, as a result of the irreparable and persisting crisis of global capitalism since 2008, out of which China has emerged as a major economic rival to the US, and the failures of the US's wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, and Syria. And so what we see today with the wars in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and in Sudan are the products, I think, of American imperial decline and of the reorganization of the world with it. Trump's seemingly erratic and lunatic behavior is, I think, the personification of the dominant section of the American ruling class coming to terms with this changing reality of the old order grappling with the new. And, the attack on Venezuela at the start of this year, the strangulation of Cuba, the threats against Panama, Mexico, Colombia, Greenland, the support for Israel's genocide against the Palestinians and the wars in Lebanon and Iran, as well as the fueling of the conflict in Sudan, are all expressions of this. And by all considerations, and whether or not the ceasefire continues, I think the United States has failed in Iran. Its goal when it began the war in Iran was regime change, and that regime stays intact. Its goal then changed to keeping the Strait of Hormuz open, which remains closed and is now firmly cemented in Iranian control. And its relations with the Gulf countries are in question. The entire architecture of the US's control in the Middle East has depended on the United States underwriting the security of those Gulf countries, which it has utterly failed to do with, the Iranian attacks on US bases in those countries, actually putting them in harm's way. And so I think it's hard to predict the sort of direct knock-on effect of that war on the conflict in Sudan, because I think on the one hand, the turn by particularly Saudi Arabia and UAE, but of all of those countries towards protecting their own territories during this war, the impact of their ability to export oil, particularly for the UAE, will impact their ability to materially support the RSF in Sudan. But at the same time, I think this situation has done little to bridge the sort of growing schism between Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and may make them turn even more towards trying to bolster their position in Sudan and in Africa more generally. But I think what is clear amid all of this horror and what is happening in Sudan, as well as what has happened in Palestine and Lebanon and Iran, is utterly horrific. I think this is a moment of flux for the system. It is a moment of great contradiction and weaknesses on the part of the warmongering elites. And I think this is where we can have the most impact. The movement for Palestine that has emerged over the last 2.5 years has created a massive global challenge to Western imperialism. It has generated a mass level of politicization and dissent, and it has resulted in the increasing isolation of Israel and of the United States. And I think we saw in the last month Trump's attempt to rope European allies into the war in Iran have backfired, and and we're seeing new sort of regional formations, the sort of changing of alliances, and this growing schism within Western imperialism. And I think that is what we need to exploit, and we need to do that with specific solidarity with Sudan. All of the things that Rania mentioned that we should be doing are things that we should get behind. And not least just to show the people of Sudan that they have not been forgotten, that they are not alone in what is going on. But also, I think to try and increase the strain on Britain's relations with the UAE, but also with Saudi Arabia, to limit the weaponry that is being used to kill Sudanese people, and to also, I think, try and increase the desperately needed humanitarian aid. But I think it has to be sort of part of a broader anti-imperialist and anti-war movement. I think to stop this conflict, we should be clear that we need to weaken and ultimately stop imperialism. We need to strengthen the movements against war and genocide. And I think in Britain, this has particularly taken the form of opposition to the genocide in Palestine, mainly because of Britain's more direct role in supporting Israel's crimes, both historically and currently. And I think it is a movement that can be measured in its threat to the state by how the state is trying to attack it. Just yesterday, the parliament voted in the next step of introducing new laws to curb our right to protest. And we know that on the 16th of May, the Metropolitan Police have given the entire central London to Tommy Robinson, the fascist, for his next demonstration on the same day that the Palestine movement is to be demonstrating in commemoration of the Nakba. And so I think, this is something that we need to challenge and to try and force them to reverse, but we also need to ensure that demonstration is massive. We need to flood the streets of London with people who oppose the war in Iran, who oppose the genocide in Gaza, who oppose the civil war in Sudan and our country's role in all of those things, and to oppose fascism. And I'll end with this, that I think there is not a straight turn towards war and genocide and fascism. I think this is a deeply contested picture. And I think the Sudanese revolution itself was an example of this. I'll never forget the footage of Allah Salah shouting on top of the car, which I think inspired so many of us. But there's also been huge movements across the globe, from the mass movements against austerity from Bolivia to Nigeria to Kenya, to dockers in Italy who have stopped arms being loaded to Israel, to the flotillas that have tried to deliver aid to Palestine and to Cuba, and on and on. And now, more than ever, we need to take heart from what we can achieve in the face of imperialist violence and recognize, I think, the need for a stronger movement and for an internationally coordinated and linked up movement. And I think the 20th of June International Conference Against War is a key opportunity for us to develop this, for us to bring activists from across Europe and across the world to try and coordinate our efforts and to build an international movement. So I think it would be great for us to build that in all spheres, to bring together the labor movement and trade unions, to bring together anti-war activists and anti-fascist activists, to bring together the people who are the most sort of at the sharpest end of imperialist violence, whether that is Palestinians or Sudanese people or others. So I'll end it there. Thank you.